Is an international campaign to challenge violence against women and girls. For far too long, impunity, silence and stigma have allowed violence against women to escalate to pandemic proportions. The campaign runs every year from 25th of November to the 10th of December. In this segment, we tell a story of a young South African woman who endured abuse at the hands of her loved one. CGTN's Yulissa and Jamela has more.
A bulk of women suffer abuse at the hands of their loved ones. According to a 2018 South African Police Services Crime Statistics report, femicide increased by 11% over the past 2 years alone. Loiso Lolo Saliso is one of them. She survived an abusive relationship. Saliso endured grievous bodily harm from the father of her child.
I was abused by the father of my youngest daughter. Like I said, I've got 2 daughters. And it really, it took me 11 years to speak out about it, which means that I was literally living in my own internal prison for about 11 years. And it was basically 10 years after I had broken up with him. And, I went through the ordeal. It was really awful.
According to Saliso, the perpetrator tricked her into going into his house. He did this under the pretense of wanting to converse about the child's needs.
Then when I got there, I didn't realize he was locking all the doors, which he did do. And he asked me about a man that I didn't even know, because apparently a mutual friend had played a joke that you've broken up with Lolo and look at you not doing anything and she's busy moving on with her life, etc. So
Saliso tells us that from then on, it went downhill.
When I ran to the kitchen, to the front door, it was locked. To the kitchen, it was locked. And we were in the kitchen, so I thought, is he going to grab a knife and stab me? I don't know. So the best thing I thought of is to just pretend like you're fainting, hold your breath for as long as you can until he opens up the door. And I did that, and that's the longest I've ever held my breath.
Saliso says her abuser kept kicking her anyway, even though she was lying on the floor. He would eventually panic, open the door, and drag her outside. Saliso then heard noises of a car and people talking. That's when she saw an opportunity to bolt and run for her life.
It's a scar that will never ever go away. You have to live with it, you have to be strong with it. Sometimes when you talk, you're okay, you're strong, you're bold, and sometimes you're not. Because every time you share it, you do relive what you went through.
Saliso is just one of many women in South Africa who suffer from abuse. Others don't live to tell their stories. But she has hope that it's no longer business as usual for government when it comes to this issue.
There is a better response. I mean, we recently just saw the very first National Gender Summit happening in this country. So there is definitely a response. However, we are no longer moved by what our leaders say. We will only celebrate and be excited when they start implementing.
Saliso is one of the initiators of the Total Shutdown movement. It's a movement that primarily fights against gender-based violence.
I just don't want people to live through this dysfunction. And it's possible.
Saliso now works with young women, focusing on those who come from broken homes, assisting them on the road to find self-love and worth. Yulissa and Jamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, in Nigeria's capital, Lagos, the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women has begun a 4-day consultation and dialogue with traditional and religious leaders on child marriage and female genital mutilation in Africa. The global body urged traditional leaders to protect the girl child from these cultural practices. The consultations aim to galvanize efforts to end the cultural practice in Africa. Over 120 million women and girls in Africa have experienced female genital mutilation and child marriage. Well, as we heard there, over 120 million women and girls in Africa have experienced female genital mutilation and child marriage. Some regions within the continent are more affected than others. Now, to discuss this issue, we're joined by CGTN's Yasser Hakim, who is in Cairo for us, and CGTN's Coletta Wanjoe in Addis Ababa. Let's start with you, Coletta. Despite a ban on early child marriages and FGM, the practices are still quite common in Ethiopia and the wider Horn of Africa region. Why is that?
Well, Karen, we're talking about statistics that are not so good. We're talking about more than 50 million women, I mean girls at that, who are really exposed to FGM or at the risk of being exposed to FGM. But the problem, I can divide that into three issues according to what experts are saying. One, we've got countries that have banned, more than 20 countries have banned FGM, but the laws have not been enforced. I mean, we're not seeing a real criminalization of the act of FGM and also discrimination against girls who have undergone FGM. Secondly, we have a situation whereby the communities are still embedded in their own culture. In areas where FGM is practiced, in countries like Ethiopia and many others, we still have people who believe that it is right for a woman or for a girl to undergo FGM. It is right for a girl to do it like her mother did it, or like her aunties did it, or like other girls in the village are doing it. So it is about culture, something that is all about attitude change. And then we have a situation in countries whereby mothers and and parents and guardians are taking their girls across the borders to other nations where the laws are a bit relaxed. We're seeing that, reports of that in countries like Burkina Faso, where people from Burkina Faso are taking their girls to Mali, where the laws are a bit relaxed. So it is more about criminalization of the FGM has not been fully enforced, Karen.
Okay, thank you, Coletta. Now over to you. Yes, statistics show that a large majority of the female population in Egypt have experienced female genital mutilation. Young girls are also being married off early. How dire is the situation there in Egypt?
Yes, it has been a big issue in the last few decades. It's improving a little bit now in the last 10 years or so because of the stringent punishments that has been put into place and by law, and the new laws that have even been punishing the families, not just the doctors. Before it was the doctor who would be punished, but now the parents as well could be put behind bars, and in addition to the doctors and the officials who did so, and this is becoming a big issue here, with the civil society also intervening, calling on people to report on any cases like this, and trying also to encourage to the families where there are victims to report their cases, telling them that not to be afraid. And there's a hotline that is always put around to try to help those in need, to reach out to experts and officials to help them, and to also give them the courage to report such incidents, and to ensure that the perpetrators these days would be taken to justice. And the media is also working on this a lot to try to shed some light, the local media obviously, to shed some light on how dangerous it's become, and how this should not be happening anymore in the communities like in Egypt.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so over to you again, Coletta. The meeting in Lagos is looking to engage community leaders in this fight against these vices. Ethiopia is a country where community conversations have helped. Tell us more about that.
Well, what we have seen the Ethiopian government doing over the years is going down to the grassroots level and meeting these leaders. Remember, these leaders could be religious leaders, could be leaders within the society, amongst the situation or the communities where FGM is happening. These are opinion leaders. These are people who are looked up to. These are people who are listened to. So what Ethiopia, we have women who are also leaders, who are pushing their own girls and other people's girls to go into FGM. So the government is engaging with these leaders and telling them that it is time to change, and the change can begin with the leaders. And by that, we are seeing them encouraging the leaders to be examples in their communities, to encourage other community members to take their girls to school, and for the girls who've already undergone FGM, to encourage these leaders, to encourage also the community not to discriminate against them, and for the girls who've not undergone it, they are using these leaders to discourage the guardians of these girls not to make the girls undergo FGM. So there is a full recognition that both women and both female and male leaders have a role to play. And we are seeing changes, especially in the Afar region towards the borders of Djibouti and Ethiopia, we're seeing some changes. We're seeing the government going in and leaders speaking up, men speaking up and telling their young men that do not accept to marry maybe a girl who says she must undergo FGM, or do not accept to be coerced into the issue, or accepting that FGM is okay for a woman. So we are seeing that happening, but still more has to be done. It is more about attitude change, Karen. It takes time, but we are seeing progress.
Okay, Coletta, over to you again. Yes, a 5-year national strategy to prevent child marriage was launched in 2014. Also in the middle of this, an update.
Or early child marriages, but also to punish those who do so and their families. And before it was a fine, now they can be jailed for these offenses, for FGM or early child marriages. And at the same time, this awareness campaign is reaching out to the areas where this happens most, and these are the poor areas in the villages, in the suburbs of the country, and in the poor, low-income areas, and that's where these families are, where you can find most of the cases. And they reach out to them not just through the media, but also through preachings and the sheikhs and Muslim clerics, because they try to explain to them that their traditions and their thoughts are misinterpretations of Islam, and that the real Islam does not call for doing action that would hurt the child physically, mentally, psychologically, or even hurt the community, because having a young child married means a young child who's a mother, and she cannot even to take care of herself, let alone take care of a little baby as a baby herself. So it's a big issue that's a social issue, not just political, or not just concerning health or women, but it concerns the whole community, and it affects the health of the whole community in all its aspects, even economically. And this is the main criteria of this campaign, to try to create the awareness for the women, for the men, and for the families in all the community, that this has to stop either early child marriages or FGM, besides adopting the strong laws to prevent the spread of this issue in Egypt.
Okay, thank you very much. That was CGTN's Yasser Hakim there for us in Cairo, and earlier CGTN's Coletta Wanjoy in Addis Ababa on the UN meeting in Lagos on early child marriage and FGM practices. Moving on to other news now, the Democratic Republic of Congo has acknowledged the terror threat against the US Embassy in Kinshasa after holding talks with American officials. The DRC's Foreign Affairs Minister, Leonard Shea Okitundu, says information that they've received showed the threat was serious. His remarks come a week after the Congolese Communication Minister dismissed the threat as a move by Washington to spark fear ahead of the country's December elections. CGTN's Chris Ochenringa has more.
The U.S. Embassy in the Democratic Republic of Congo has been closed for over a week due to what its website described as credible and specific information of a possible terror threat. No further information was given by the embassy regarding the threat. The announcement was last week criticized by the DRC's communications minister as a plan by the U.S. to spark fear ahead of the polls in December. But the Congolese government has made a turnaround. The Foreign Affairs Minister, Leonard Okitundu, says intelligence information they received has shown that the threat was serious.
It's clear the terrorist threat was real. The United States and our intelligence services got credible information about it. We are now working with the US and other regional partners to counter the terrorists' plans.
According to the U.S. government broadcaster VOA, the threat came from a group affiliated with the Islamic State. The U.S. Embassy has decided to reopen to the public after assessing the situation. It was closed on November 26th, and a warning issued to U.S. citizens to keep a low profile. The DRC is set to go to the polls on December 23rd to choose a new leader to replace President Joseph Kabila. The U.S. has been calling on Congolese authorities to ensure that the elections are held in a peaceful and democratic manner. Chris Ochenringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including Chinese President Xi Jinping arrives in Lisbon for a two-day state visit. And in South Africa, a survey reveals why HIV patients are developing resistance to antiretrovirals.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is now in Portugal for a two-day visit. He was welcomed with a formal ceremony in the capital by Portugal's President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa. This is the first time a Chinese head of state has visited Portugal in 8 years. Well, President Xi aims to expand cooperation between the two countries. Xi will lay a wreath at the tomb of Portugal's most famous poet, Luís de Camões. He'll then meet with his Portuguese counterpart and visit an exhibition on the maritime Silk Road. Well, ahead of his trip, President Xi said that he hoped to reinforce the friendship between China and Portugal. In the UK, a high-stakes 5-day parliamentary debate over last month's controversial EU withdrawal agreement has begun, as angry to quit. However, UK Prime Minister Theresa May says she's adamant that members of Parliament should respect the verdict of the 2015 referendum. Our correspondent Richard Bestick explains how this ruling might affect the deal's future.
I think it's probably more something of clarification rather than helping or hindering the UK Prime Minister. It is in line with what EU officials have said all along. But the outcome of what is the start of 7 days for Theresa May to save her EU deal, debate in the Houses of Parliament there behind me, begins an end to it. We have no idea. The confusion surrounding the possible outcome suggests that this ruling from the European Court of Justice will open up yet more options. The Prime Minister remains adamant on her position, still trying to talk around members of Parliament, speaking at the opening today, but it's got to be said, she's in a minority in that belief. Most of the MPs, the members of Parliament, are pretty much opposed, both on the opposition benches and indeed on the benches behind her, on the benches of the ruling Conservatives. She's got 7 days to save this deal. The reality is that most people expect that she won't be successful and that it will fail.
To France now, where Prime Minister Edouard Philippe has confirmed a suspension of fuel tax hikes. It's a major U-turn in an effort to appease a protest movement that has swept the country for the past 3 weeks. Philippe briefed lawmakers from President Macron's party at the National Assembly in Paris and was expected to make an official declaration later on Tuesday. Diplomats from almost 200 countries are in Poland for this year's climate change conference. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has stressed the need to reduce consumption of coal, oil and gas while increasing the use of renewable energies. The World Bank earlier committed $200 billion over a 5-year period to help countries tackle global warming. Well, despite difficulties and uncertainties, countries such as China and India say they are willing to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions in line with the target set out in the 2015 Paris Agreement. A survey released in Johannesburg has revealed that a number of people living with HIV in South Africa are developing resistance to antiretrovirals as a result of defaulting. This means patients don't take their medication regularly or on time. The survey was conducted by the Human Sciences Research Council with the assistance of UN AIDS. CGTN's Yulissa Njamela has more.
Introduced by the United Nations 1990 hopes that by 2020, 90% of people living with HIV will be diagnosed. 90% of them will be on antiretroviral, and 90% of those living with this disease will have their viral load suppressed. This survey by the Human Sciences Research Council is one of the largest national household HIV and AIDS and health surveys in the country. The study has become an internationally recognized and respected source of information on HIV and AIDS here in South Africa. The methodology used for the survey was random sampling approach. The council also used anonymous HIV testing with informed consent.
This has been a groundbreaking approach which in a way enables us to track the epidemic at a much more macro level. These surveys have been central to the approach of knowing your epidemic and knowing your response. And this has been important because this approach is central to government's approach, is central to the National AIDS Council approach in South Africa, which they continue to champion.
The research revealed that many people who are living with HIV tend to default. In other words, they're not consistently taking their medication as per requirement.
Clearly, there's a need to support adherence to reduce defaulting from ART because those people are no longer in care. 3/4 of them had drug-resistant mutations. There is also a need to strengthen the first-line regimens, maybe by introducing the integrase strand transferase inhibitors that have got a higher threshold for resistance as part of the first-line treatment, and I think there are moves to do that in South Africa, which is very encouraging.
Moyo says there's a need to look at all various levels of antiretroviral treatment programs.
These findings really are consistent with what was found in the World Health Organization HIV drug resistance report, where they found that resistance to first-line treatment ranged between 50 to 90%. So we need to look at all the various levels of the antiretroviral treatment program. So keeping people on treatment, adherence, all those things around strengthening the broader program are very important. And I think that's a policy implication for South Africa, especially with the large numbers of people that are in treatment.
South Africa's health department says this situation is quite concerning.
We do have a challenge of defaulters. We've got about 25% or so of HIV patients who are defaulting. Because we've been told that patients, they don't want to come to facilities because of the queues. As a department, we have a program that is called CCMDD, which is the Chronic Central Medication Dispensing at facilities, not facilities, in the private sector or in the communities where patients can access the ARVs for that.
South Africa has the largest HIV pandemic in the world. The country also has the largest antiretroviral program. Yulissa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A recap of our top stories now. About 15 Libyan migrants have died in a boat off the Libyan coast, according to an Egyptian survivor who spoke to Reuters news agency. The survivor said there had been 25 migrants on a boat when they set off from the western Libyan town of Sabrata. After 12 days at sea without food and water, 15 of them perished. In South Sudan, at least 125 women have been raped or sexually assaulted over a 10-day period in a series of attacks near Bentiu area. A UN report says the sex attacks took place in a government-controlled area of the country. Those assaults took place as they travelled along roads from their villages to the town of Bentiu. Many were violently beaten and robbed. Reports indicate that some victims were under 10, others over 65 years of age. Meanwhile, in Nigeria's capital, Lagos, the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women has begun a 4-day consultation and dialogue with traditional and religious leaders on child marriage and on female genital mutilation in Africa. The global body has urged traditional leaders to protect the girl child from cultural practices. And Chinese President Xi Jinping is now in Portugal for a 2-day visit. He was welcomed with a formal ceremony in the capital by Portugal's President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa. This is the first time a Chinese head of state has visited Portugal in 8 years. Well, let's now go to Ucha for all the latest business news. Over to you.
Thank you, Karen. And coming up on Africa Live Biz, South Africa emerges from a decade-long recession. And authorities in Nigeria issue an international warrant of arrest for the former oil minister.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairo. Hello, Nairo.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Let's start off in South Africa. The country has recovered from a recession after almost a decade. Now, latest economic data shows the country's economy expanded by 2.2% in the third quarter of the year. Now, Statistics South Africa says manufacturing expanded 7.5%, agriculture grew by 6.5%, however, mining contracted 8.8%. Now, the positive data is a boost for President Cyril Ramaphosa, who has pledged to restart growth after stagnation under his predecessor, Jacob Zuma. The economic expansion will also ease fears of credit downgrades. Now, analysts are saying they expect the recovery to continue into 2019, but that recent electricity outages by ailing power utility firm Eskom poses a threat to the economy. And to Nigeria now, the country's anti-corruption body has issued an international arrest warrant for its former oil minister, Daisani Alison Madueke. Now, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission wants to charge the former minister for stealing public funds running to millions of dollars. Madueke is currently being investigated in the United Kingdom over money laundering crimes. She was oil minister under former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan from 2010 to 2015. Alison Madueke has been in London since 2015 after being released on bail and having her passport seized following her arrest. Now, she was the first woman to lead the Organization of Oil Exporting Countries, or OPEC. The trial of a former prominent personality will be a major score for President Buhari, who of course is seeking re-election in 2019. Meanwhile, Russia and Saudi Arabia have agreed to extend their cooperation to balance the oil market in 2019. This, of course, has paved way for a deal at the OPEC meeting this week in Vienna, Austria. The OPEC Advisory Committee recommended a cut of about 1.3 million barrels a day last week, but the group received an unexpected cut of 325,000 barrels a day from Canada. Now, steady production and record oil output has helped Saudi Arabia offset losses, and that's after U.S. sanctions on Iran. The respective shares of supply are based on the October output, as the International Monetary Fund estimated the price each member of the bloc needs to balance its 2018 budget. Now, here in Kenya, the budget deficit is expected to fall to 4.7%. That's after peaking up to 7%. The government has been increasing borrowing and spending in recent years, leaving it with a huge fiscal deficit. Treasury is already in talks with other lenders to roll over a $760 million syndicated loan this fiscal year. It plans to lengthen its maturity in order to make debt repayments more manageable. Kenya is seeking to increase the tenor of the loan arranged by the Trade and Development Bank to at least 10 years now. The government was likely to spend $27 billion in the next fiscal year, up from a revised $24 billion in the current financial year. Now, the Kenya-Chinese Economic Trade Association has hosted an inaugural award ceremony to recognize outstanding Kenyan employees working in Chinese companies operating in the country. Well, this year's ceremony saw staff awarded for their excellent output in trade, infrastructure, manufacturing, as well as technology. Now, the ceremony also enhanced the importance of bilateral ties between the two nations. And here's CGTN's Terry Wangari reporting.
It was a celebratory mood here at the Intercontinental Hotel in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. In this year's awards ceremony, 55 Kenyan employees from 20 different Chinese enterprises were awarded for their achievements within their respective organizations. The event was also part of the 55th anniversary celebrations of Kenya-China diplomatic relations. Li Suhang, the charge d'affaires to the Chinese embassy in Kenya, praised this relationship and acknowledged China's efforts in developing the Kenyan economy.
Ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brothers, Dada and Ndugu, the China-Kenyan relationship is now standing at a new starting point with an even brighter future. This year, in September, we have a China-Africa Cooperation Forum Summit. Chinese President Xi Jinping announced 8 major initiatives, opening an even more ambitious new chapter for China-Africa cooperation. 8 major initiatives will pull the strength of the Belt and Road Initiative and attract more Chinese companies come to invest in Kenya. Actually, in recent past 2 weeks, there are already 4 delegations coming from China, and more than 200 entrepreneurs looking for investment opportunity in Kenya. So we can predict in the near future there will be more and more Chinese companies come to here, invest here, and create more and more jobs.
The winners come from across the country, representing 24 counties, including Kisii, Siaya, Nairobi, Kilifi, Busia, Taita Taveta, Machakos, Kitui, and Meru.
Where were we then?
Through this ceremony, the Kenya-Chinese Economic Trade Association, otherwise known as KCETA, aims to explore business cooperation between China and Kenya, enhance cultural exchanges, while actively shouldering corporate social responsibility to promote community cohesion.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs, we appreciate this friendship. We appreciate partnership that delivers results. Only last week, we hosted a fantastic global event here in Nairobi. The first ever Sustainable Blue Economy Conference. 17,600 delegates from 187 countries from across the world were here in Nairobi for 3 days. We want to thank China for being a very key supporter, a very key partner with us in that journey. And I look forward to this partnership growing from strength to strength.
A round of applause for them.
The winners will also get a chance to travel to Beijing, China, where they will get to experience Chinese culture and learn more about their respective professions. Among the Chinese enterprises that will facilitate the trip to China are China Road and Bridge Company, Huawei Technologies Kenya, and Keda Kenya Ceramics Company Limited. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
Let's stay in the country. This stock of unpaid loans being held by commercial banks here has grown by $66 million in 9 months, up to the end of September. Now, this has been brought about by a challenging business environment that has seen many small businesses and households defaulting. The latest banking sector data shows loans rose to $326 million from about $260 million in a similar period last year. Now, the rise of non-performing loans is against state data that indicates that the economy grew by 6% in the first half of the year. Now, the statistics confirm observations by economists that heavy public spending on infrastructure is driving growth. Kenyan banks have since responded to this rise in the risk profile of borrowers by diverting money to government securities. Meanwhile, the Egyptian government has released the results of trade with Arab countries for the first 8 months of 2018. Arab states are Egypt's largest trading partners, amounting to more than 30% of total annual volumes, while CGTN's Yasser Hakim compares the latest numbers to those from previous years.
The figures show Egypt has increased its trade with Arab countries by 12% year-on-year. United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia topped the list of importers of Egyptian goods with $1.6 billion and $1 billion respectively in 2018. Exports include agricultural products, handicraft, textiles and clothing. There's been a surge in exports since the floating of the Egyptian pound in November 2016, in spite of the recession hitting emerging markets.
Egypt now can have a competitive edge around the emerging markets, that we have a low exchange rate and a low soft cost of the people or the human capital. The World Bank announced yesterday that Egypt has a competitive advantage in the emerging markets, and they forecast that Egypt will not be affected as much as the rest of the emerging markets.
Egypt's North African neighbors have also been trading at higher volumes in 2018. Trade with Algeria and Morocco has increased by 16%, exceeding $1.5 billion for both, compared with last year. And experts say there are plans to grow exports.
To the North African, we are now studying that to export final products, final spare parts, cars, vehicles spare parts, and we are studying that we can export materials like the handicraft. We need more significant change in the regulation between Egypt and the Arab world. What I'm really interested in or admired of the agreement between Egypt and UAE and Egypt and Saudi Arabia. This may increase the trade exchange between Egypt and the Arab countries.
In 2018, Egypt has balanced its trade surplus with 15 out of the 22 Arab countries. There is huge potential for improvement in Arab economies. However, the latest regional conflicts have put constraints on bilateral trade and investments. And the dream of having an Arab common market similar to the EU would be put on hold because of the latest instabilities. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up on Global Business Africa, we'll examine Egypt's move to raise the value of the dollar tariff on imported goods. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, it's back to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Ocha. Well, we are going to a short break now. Don't go away, lots more to come, including meet the refugee tailor that's fashionably defying disability in Kenya.
Join us in global business and see Africa through our eyes.
To South Africa, where the late Nelson Mandela's long walk to freedom began on a dusty stretch of road between Durban and Johannesburg. Mandela was arrested by police after leaving a clandestine ANC meeting. He had managed successfully to evade capture for 17 months, but authorities finally caught up with him. The road has been commemorated, and now, more than 56 years later, a monument has been built at the very site he was caught as a tribute to the sacrifices he made to secure his country's freedom. CGTN's Travis Andrews with this story.
In August 1962, Nelson Mandela was arrested on this road in Howick, about 107 kilometers outside of Durban. It's an historical event, which eventually saw him spend 27 years of his life in prison. Today, the Nelson Mandela capture site stands as a memorial to his arrest and sacrifices, and is a powerful tribute to the major role he played to secure the country's freedom and democracy.
This is the first important before Robben Island, because this is where exactly he was captured. Then he was sent to Robben Island. So this is the main spot. It's important. We welcome here tourists to come view the Nelson Mandela sculpture further down. They can take pictures, make videos just to honor Nelson Mandela.
The sculpture is a two-dimensional portrayal of the late statesman, comprising of 50 steel columns which reveal an image of Madiba's face when viewed from the correct angle. Now 5 years on since his passing, and visitors have been streaming in to pay their respects to his life and where his journey began, being incarcerated.
It hits home knowing that his whole prison sentence and capturing of him started here. So at least as a South African guy coming here, you're able to see where, everything started. So it kind of hits home, and it hits the heart.
The Mandela capture site is also a key tourism attraction for the town, and many visitors from around the world also piling in to pay homage to a true global leader.
I don't think any other person in world politics and world leadership has commanded the respect that he has. So actually to be here and just see a site that's connected with him is really moving.
The Apartheid Museum at the site also offers visitors great insight into the timelines from his arrest to his presidency. The capture site is currently undergoing a major refurbishment, which is set to be completed in May next year, and will include a new state-of-the-art interactive museum, so that more and more people can get to appreciate the important legacy that Nelson Mandela has left behind. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Howick, KwaZulu-Natal.
To Kenya now, where a refugee from the Democratic Republic of Congo is defying disability. Despite having a physical disability, she's managed to establish a successful tailoring business and is now employing other refugees. CGTN's Alexandria Majala reports.
In this corrugated shop in northern Kenya, Hota Biclair stitches fabric for her successful dressmaking business, something made all the more impressive by the challenges she has overcome. Since she was a child, Biclair has lived with a debilitating spinal condition. On top of that, 6 years ago, she was forced to flee her home in the Democratic Republic of Congo to this refugee camp in Kakuma, home to 185,000 refugees.
After 2 weeks in Kakuma, I met someone who employed me. After working for 7 months, I saved some money. I was able to buy a second-hand machine and start my own business.
Today, and with the help of a $1,000 loan from the UN Refugee Agency, Biclair has grown her business to 7 sewing machines and employs 7 other refugees as tailors. But her condition makes the work hard.
Sometimes I get tired, but I work hard because my children depend on me. Even with my disability, they need a parent to take care of them.
I like Biclair because whenever Biclair said, come tomorrow, you come tomorrow and pick your dress when it's ready.
The World Health Organization estimates that some 15% of the global population lives with some form of disability. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Well, we've got all the sports news after the break, including The Africa Women's Handball Championship kicks off in Congo-Brazzaville with the host registering a victory.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout, for every step of the way. Match Point, only on CGTN.
We begin with handball news. The 23rd edition of the Africa Women's Handball Championships has kicked off at the Concord Sports Complex in Congo-Brazzaville. Hosts Congo-Brazzaville opened their campaign for a 5th championship by dispatching Morocco 36-23 for their first win. Elsewhere, 12-time champions and defending champs Angola beat Guinea 40-17. Senegal defeated Cameroon 23-18, while Algeria narrowly edged out Côte d'Ivoire 27-25. The final of the competition will take place on December the 12th.
Our team is very young. This is our first time participating in AFCON, and we are here to learn. We are here to stay, and losing isn't a problem. This is our first game and the competition is ongoing. We are in very good shape and had a very warm welcome, so everything is going well.
I'm here to cheer for the Congolese team. Many African countries are here, and it's really heartwarming. It's the first game, so I don't know how strong the other teams are. But I do believe that the Congolese team will go far in this competition.
To athletics news now. Russian athletes will remain banned from international competitions after the IAAF upheld the country's suspension into 2019. The athletics governing body banned Russia in November 2015 because of evidence of state-sponsored doping. The ban will remain in place until samples and data from Moscow's former anti-doping laboratory are made available. Russia must also pay all costs incurred by the work of the IAAF's task force. It's the 9th time the IAAF has turned down Russia's appeal for reinstatement. The decision puts the IAAF at odds with other sporting bodies such as WADA and the International Olympic Committee. They've revoked their suspensions of Russia. Real Madrid's Croatian midfielder Luka Modric was named winner of the 2018 Ballon d'Or on Monday, breaking Cristiano Ronaldo's and Lionel Messi's decade-long hold on the prestigious award. Modric helped Real Madrid win a 3rd successive Champions League title in May and captained Croatia to their first World Cup final. Olympique Lyonnais' Norwegian forward Ada Hegerberg won the inaugural Ballon d'Or for women's football, having led her side to the Women's Champions League title.
I would change my all individual awards for World Cup. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Even this success that we achieved at the World Cup is for such a small country as Croatia is something amazing. But I would, like I told you, I would change all of this for World Cup. But how it didn't happen, this is a great feeling to win at least this, and very happy for it.
I think this is a fantastic day for women's football in general. It's historical. It's a big step forward for women's football to have this award, and that's why you need to take the moment to really cherish it and show the importance of pushing younger girls to pursue their dreams.
Meanwhile, Nigeria's opponents, South Africa, have had a remarkable year. Apart from finishing runners-up to Nigeria this weekend, they've defended their Kosafa Cup title and secured qualification to the World Cup. The coach and team are also up for prestigious CAF awards. CGTN CS Duplessis reports.
Supporters of the South African national team gathered in their numbers to welcome back the side and celebrate Banyana Banyana's first ever qualification for the World Cup. The tournament's top goal scorer and CAF Player of the Year nominee, Thembi Kgatlana, says it was overwhelming to see the support for the team after their second-place finish in Ghana.
It was very heartwarming to see everyone leaving whatever duties they have to welcome the team. I mean, since I've been playing for Banyana, I've never ever seen this. It's always about boys, but today it was all about Banyana.
The Banyana Banyana skipper Janine van Wyk, who is also nominated for the Player of the Year award, says she was blown away by the reception and believes qualifying for the World Cup is the highlight of her career.
This is probably my top rank achievement I've ever achieved. Out of participating in the Olympic Games, being in several AFCON competitions, beating Nigeria, this is ranked the best.
Coach Desiree Ellis, who departs later this week for the World Cup draw, says she is extremely proud of her team and their efforts at the tournament.
We're just disappointed that we couldn't bring the cup home, but we got there, done what we were supposed to do, and that was qualify for the World Cup. I said right at the beginning it's not negotiable, and we kept using that word, but we said we needed to be phenomenal, and we were.
Despite finishing as runners-up for the 5th time at the Africa Cup of Nations, it's mission accomplished for Team South Africa. They've qualified for the World Cup, it's job done, and the heroes' welcome they've received here at OR Tambo International speaks volume for what they have done for women's football in the country. They'll enjoy some time off before shifting their focus to the global showpiece in France next year. Cies du Plessis, CGTN, Johannesburg.
Well, that's it for this edition of Africa Live. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on the screen and follow us on digital media platforms. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Bye for now.